tell me the name of the gallery where Hermes has got an exhibition?
North House Gallery, and it's in a town called Manningtree in Essex.
Oh, it's not in London?
It's not in London, no. Waste of time.
No, but I can check it out online.
Yeah.
So just coming back to the work again, I wanted to ask both of you what appealed to you about this piece and whether you knew anything about the Rocker family beforehand.
I was coming to the piece afresh, and there's something quite quiet about it, something very unassuming. The characters seem to be hiding, but I mean they're all caught in this moment within themselves, and I felt translating that into this lack of any real kind of emotion behind the figures that I recreated in the image. There's more of a mask in front of all their faces where you can't really, you're trying to get behind them, but they're not there.
But you've injected lots of life and colour into your...
Yeah, there's, and that's just the nature of the way I work, is trying to bring some sort of energy to the situation. There's also the use of the paint, but interesting. I try to reflect that especially on the way the platform is painted. Just the variation of colours and ways that the paint came through different layers.
Yeah, I kind of can relate quite a lot to Simeon's approach when first presented with painting. It was, again, for me, the first time I came across Rocker's work. But the painting did jump out for its subtlety. The palette, it was quite subtle, I thought. Yeah, it kind of rang true to a lot of the questions that I had in my own practice, and also the subject matter itself. I worked a lot with similar ideas. So my response, I was quite aware of my position as the idea of it being contemporary. So I think Natalie sort of touched on it earlier on. I was wanting to think about how sort of what contemporary means today. So I kind of I was thinking a lot of my work in general deals with sort of themes that deal with cinema within painting, and so there was this element that I was interested in with 3D and how that's incorporated at the moment with a lot of the movie industry, and there's kind of this pseudo-contemporary trend. But actually it was really popular in the 50s and 60s with anaglyphic imagery, which kind of links in with the time period of the original Rocker piece. And so yeah, when I sort of had these ideas, Natalie would send me over the imagery, and we were working from digital format, and so I didn't want to put too heavy of a hand into the process, so I kind of wanted to deal with the idea of it being a digital image, and yeah, so these elements sort of came together, and it culminated in what we was trying to sort of bring out is this idea of this kind of physical 3D space, which is kind of touches on taste within contemporary art and surface. That's how it happened.
So, did you see the stillness in Rocker's original, as you did, because I find your picture very still.
There's definitely an element of this frozen period of time. I think that comes with a lot of, well, all realistic work. But yeah, this scene does seem to be trapped. I mean, actually, me and Philip were talking previously about how this stillness has become a part of Fermin's work within this kind of frozen period of time in the 60s. Philip was mentioning that his work post-1960 has an element of this frozen period of time.
Like Edward
in
Hopper.
the aesthetic, yeah, in the aesthetic sort of dealing with subject matter. There's no sort of modern, it's not, doesn't address, it's kind of nostalgic in that respect. I mean, that's what...
Yeah, but I was just thinking you chose the 3D, which for me means life and movement and special effects, 3D, films, and yet you've got a stillness there at the same time as the 3D aspect. So there's a bit of an interesting contrast. Possibly, why did you use colour in the background and monotone in the foreground figures? Was that conscious?
Well, it was a technical result, but it's interesting because I was drawn to that originally. I think a recurring outcome in Rocker's work is this stark contrast between dark and light. Usually the foreground has an element, whether it's trees or people, to have this dark tone, and then it automatically sort of bleaches out the further you go into the distance. So I think that almost was emphasised in the execution of the piece that I made. But it was coincidence, and it does bring out...
Was you attracted by the red of that lady's coat in the original, and then in your picture you've used red in the background quite a bit?
Oh, I see. Well, the nature of an anaglyphic image takes out the red and the blue from a photograph and completely bleaches out the rest. The technical sort of format of how the image works is that there's a limitation to the colours. So it was a limited colour palette.
He would know about that, wouldn't he?
I'm sure he would, yeah.
There's more of a, sorry.
I was asking, when we were talking with another person who was looking, how do you actually create a 3D?
Okay.
How do you know what it's going to look like when...
You can manipulate the image to a certain extent. It's called, the software is called After Effects, and you create a fictional 3D depth map, it's called. So you decide how close each element is to you, and you cut those out with a digital pair of scissors.
No, I see. But this is a painting, or that's created on
the image. Sorry, go on.
Is it a painting, or is it a computer-generated
This piece,
image?
this object. Yeah, this is painted.
So you did it according, you
According to
manipulated
the
it first,
photograph.
and then you, nice.
So yeah.
Because 2D, 3D, you take it with two cameras, so it's more
Exactly,
than a camera,
that's-
right? And it sort of mesh together.
You simulate each eye
Right.
in the way that it channels the vision in the program by shifting the space. So you create fundamentally two separate images that then merge together with the red and the blue in opposite ends, and the brain works in a way that compensates for that lack of understanding.
Okay.
Was there a reason that you chopped off the top of your picture, whereas in the original you can see the sky?
It was actually just a result of the nature of the process of creating it 3D. Basically, because you separate the two images, there is this element where there's this crop has to happen as there's two separate. But I mean, that kind of is an example of some of the process that I didn't really feel like the taste and how it's it is cropped, and it is on a. It's like that taste. It is. I wanted to I want to emphasise that sort of subject around a sort of a pre-made canvas, and 3D. It's not 3D in the way that cinema is today.
I just wondered if you kept the distance in the sky, whether the 3D effect with the glasses would be even more dramatic.
Yeah.
And if you could have had an oncoming train.
Yeah.
There's no train in the original.
With a, what?
They're waiting. There's no train.
It's running late, it's going to be here soon. It is a Sunday.
Oh yeah, pretty sure. It must be a Virgin train.
Exactly, yeah. But it was Neil's first 3D painting, so.
Yeah.
Very successful.
I think there is
It's very successful.
I have noticed, I don't know if anyone's seen the film Pina, about the choreographer, and that's in 3D, but it's not a huge Hollywood blockbuster like sci-fi special effects festival. It's quite a quiet film about quite an introverted woman and these amazing dance pieces she created, and they used 3D quite critically. At one point the camera pans backwards and it's a view of a cinema, so the 3D just puts more heads in front of you as you're watching the film. And so I think Neil has kind of picked up on this almost kind of critical backlash against just excessive and superfluous uses of technology and chasing after some kind of skewed idea of newness, which I think reflects somewhat what we were trying to do with the exhibition as well, like whether it's a good thing to try and refresh a collection and pull it into contemporary times or not.
That's the kind of question I was interested in.
What was the name of the ballet film?
Pina, P-I-N-A.
No rush.
Yeah, that's right.
Listen, I know I'm hogging a lot of the questions, but I'd like to ask you a question about your, very, very sort of monotone colours, relatively monotone, stillness in the original.
Yes.
For yours, bright colours.
Yes.
Bit hard to capture the quiet and the stillness with those bright colours, for me personally.
Okay.
But were you trying to catch the quiet and the rest, the stillness of the original?
I mean, there's this. It's the nature of the thing is that I was trying to capture more of a tension. Though I feel that there is a quiet. I wouldn't say it's a loud painting in terms of what's happening. I mean, that there's no train there, and there's like each set of figures is isolated. But it's more to do with the train station itself.
I think your figures are not interacting at all in the same way that these aren't. I felt that they're there, even if they're moving, they're all separate from each other, and they're never going to talk to each other the same as these figures here.
I don't feel are they ever going to talk?
No, exactly. I'm saying I think you've captured that, the fact that they are all on the platform, whether they're moving or not, or they're not going to ever interact with each other, and nor are these figures. In the same way as often, I'm not often on the underground, but when I am, I'm kind of sitting there and everyone else is sitting, waiting for a train, and nobody looks, talks, and that's, I think, what's happening in that. However bright the colours are, it doesn't make it more active than that.
It's capture the inhuman aspect.
Yes. So that's the narrative visuality, and then when you get past that, it begins to be more about the sort of various formal and physical qualities of the paint.